Good evening. Welcome to EquityAxis News, your home for your financial insights and real-time stock quotes. I'm Sandra Chororo. Let's get to business. The High Court has today set aside the 2% tax imposed by government on most electronic transfers. This is according to Zimbabwe's Lawyers for Human Rights. The 2% tax was initially introduced for transactions above $10 in October last year. The minimum threshold was later revised to transactions above 20 RTGS dollars following the 2019 midterm budget review. The 2% tax had become a major source of revenue for the government, while it remained largely burdensome for the general public as it instigated further erosion of real incomes in addition to skyrocketing inflation. Cabinet yesterday agreed to review minimum wages per month for domestic workers without industrial employment councils. The review will see gardeners getting $160, while housekeepers will be getting $168.48, and child minders will be getting $179, and as well as disabled minders with a Red Cross certificate or equivalent getting $189.70 per month, in addition to workers in unclassified operations to getting $338 per month. Let's take a look at the post-cabinet briefing as we get more details on the subject.
Item number 4. Cabinet agreed to review minimum wages per month for domestic workers and workers without industrial employment councils, what are commonly termed as unclassified operations. Item A. Gardener. The minimum wage for a gardener will be $160 Zimbabwe dollars. Minimum wage for a housekeeper will be $168.48 Zimbabwe dollars. Minimum wage for a child minder will be $179 Zimbabwe dollars. Disabled minder with a Red Cross certificate or equivalent, it will be $189.70. Workers in unclassified operations, it will be $338 Zimbabwe dollars. Cabinet further approved the following rates in terms of allowances for domestic workers who are not accommodated in their places of work. Accommodation for standard one room, $60 Zimbabwe dollars. Transport based on Zupo fares is $50. Fuel for cooking is $20. Lighting $10, and water $10. Employers should note that these are minimum wages and that they are most encouraged to raise them, taking into account the circumstances.
Zimbabwe's total foreign currency receipts for the first half of 2019 were down 24% to $2.5 billion as the country battles to lure investment. Foreign investment contributions for the 6 months were also down 1.4%, coming in at $14.4 billion from the previously recorded $14.6 million. Tourism receipts fell by 30% to $60 million from $89.2 million recorded in the prior year, while exports for the half year dropped by 7.5% to $1.9 billion from the previously recorded $2 billion registered during the same period last year. Diaspora remittance contributions fell by 13.2%, coming in at $504 million. Telecommunications, however, rose from $2.1 million to $6.5 million this year, and this was due to periodic tariff review by the industry players. According to economist Prosper Chitambura, the forex receipts reflected a faltering economy which was choked by the rolling power cuts. Rwanda's economy grew by 12.2% from April to June, and this was due to the economic growth was driven by the agriculture and industry as well as services in the country. Services such as trade, transport, finance, as well as professional and technical activities were the main drivers of the growth in the second quarter of the year. Overall, the service sector grew by 12% at the back of a 23% increase in wholesale and retail trade activities. The agriculture and industry sectors contributed 28% and 17% of the GDP respectively. Zambia is in the process of acquiring energy from South Africa. The country has a deficit of power of more than 750 megawatts following the low water levels at its hydropower dams. According to Zambia's Energy Minister, Matthew Nkuwa, Zambia is in talks with South African power utility ESKOM in order to import 300 megawatts of electricity. Nkuwa also said the government also planned to send a delegation to Mozambique to negotiate a new power purchase agreement. Thank you for watching. This concludes our evening news. Catch us next as we do our evening news review with our economist.
Climbing to the top takes more than just hard work and smart choices. It's the passion that drives you from within, the endurance to keep going through difficult times, and having a very clear vision of how to succeed. That's what we strive for at CBZ. We're a diversified and innovative listed financial services group in Zimbabwe with a complete range of activities including banking, short and long-term insurance, asset management, and property investments. CBZ has been a pinnacle for stability in the economic landscape of Zimbabwe, stemming from our deep-rooted values, our excellent customer service delivery, and our corporate vision to strive for excellence as a global competitor. Our continuous investment in research and development will cement our promise to provide customer convenience utilizing state-of-the-art technology. Relationships are at the core of what we do. We understand, however, that strong, long-lasting partnerships are not built overnight. With over 3 decades of wealth management, we have come to understand our clients and their specific investment requirements. Our unique mix of skills ensures that investment opportunities are examined from all perspectives. The balancing rocks of Zimbabwe have weathered the elements for thousands of years and stood the test of time, like majestic reminders of the fine balance of nature. They challenge our perception of what is possible and what endures. Just as CBZ has weathered the economic storms and remained steadfast throughout the turbulence of unsettled economies. Achieving the impossible through resilience and stability, we balance the elements of hard work, dedication, and experience, making us your ideal partner for success.
Welcome back to our news review. Here with me is Respect Wenzi, our chief analyst. Respect, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. And you, Sandra?
I'm all right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, let's get to business. The 2% tax has been nullified. What does that mean for the Zimbabwean people? Does it mean tomorrow we won't be paying it anymore, or it's still there? It has to, since it was passed by Parliament. What does it mean now that it has been nullified by the High Court?
Okay,
where do they meet? The High Court and the Parliament and the 2%.
This is a High Court in Zimbabwe which has nullified the 2% tax which was introduced in October of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a High Court order, or this is a High Court decision, but it's subject to Supreme Court. Government may actually seek the Supreme Court for it to challenge the ruling. So that's where we're going. We are obviously going to see government challenging the decision by the High Court and the Supreme Court. Is quite standard. It happens everywhere. Just last week, the Supreme Court of Ireland, of Scotland, actually ruled that the Prime Minister of Britain had erred by when he suspended Parliament, and that decision has been drawn back to the Supreme Court of the United States, where the government has actually appealed against the High Court's order. So it's quite a standard globally that whenever a High Court fails to meet the demands of a certain body or such levels as government, they have the right to appeal. So once they appeal, it means the decision or the suspension by the High Court ceases to take effect, which means that we are obviously likely to see a sustained payment of that 2% tax up until the Supreme Court sits down to decide on its legality. But for now, there is no going back to the 2% tax. And this tax is not a product of the Parliament. Mm-hmm. It's actually a product of the executive. The executive being the Presidium, and by extension his cabinet and his Minister of Finance, making a decree through his austerity measures to introduce a 2% tax. So this was challenged actually by some of the legislators. I think the case was actually presented by Tendai Biti, who is a parliamentarian. So it just shows it didn't pass through Parliament. Mm-hmm. It was the minister's order. So there's obviously a good chance that the case might actually be won by those who are opposing it at Supreme Court level. So in the meantime, for ordinary Zimbabweans, it's the game still continues. It's not a point of celebration. Actually, even if it gets to a point where it's nullified or it's actually said to be null and void, I think there's a delicacy in that it was introduced as a way of boosting national income through boosting
but has
national.
It boosted national income?
For the first 6 months of the year, we have reported a net fiscal surplus, and that surplus
was highly inflated at the same time.
Yeah, right? It's inflated by virtue of it having a component of price increases. Mm-hmm. So whenever you increase price, definitely your revenue also grows. But a big component of that income growth also came from the 2% tax. Mm-hmm. So effectively, if you are to pursue austerity measures, then you also have to play around your taxation. But I think it's a matter of to what extent. So if this had gone through Parliament, then possibly Parliament would have advocated for a tax increase which is not necessarily 2% and maybe which is not an IMMT. But all the same, what I'm trying to say is there's always a payoff. Whenever such moves happen, then the government still will be left wide open, because when you're saying celebrating, from an economics perspective, once you lose revenue, you actually lose a leeway to spend. And the problem in Zimbabwe has been a problem of trying to meet your revenue to your expenditure. So whenever your revenue falls and your expenditure is still up there, it means you have to find ways of meeting it. And when you fail to find ways, it means you borrow. And when you borrow, it becomes inflationary. So indirectly, you will always be suffering in a way. So there has to be a balance in terms of the way forward. It's not like scraping the 2% tax will effectively get us out of our problems. We'll still possibly even get into worse problems if that issue is mismanaged. But that's not a case for the judiciary. The judiciary has to pass its ruling. Was it done in a proper way? And when it's retabled, maybe after being nullified, then the executive will have to ask for the parliament to actually ratify or to to consider that move, and then maybe once it's done normally, or the Parliament may advocate that it be reduced and so forth, and then there should be a balance in a way.
Okay, you as a Zimbabwean person, as a Zimbabwean citizen, do you support the 2% implementation, or you're not in support of it?
My views are never going to be that of a Zimbabwean. My views are always going to be that of an economist. I stand in a hard position, being a Zimbabwean who is obviously suffering the 2% tax impact, but as well, like I have just said, when you're looking at such issues, you look at it from a point of saying, if government loses this, then what? So that's what I'm trying to say, to say there should be a balance between our quest to grow our revenue and our quest to rebalance our fiscus. And in that respect, I think something should be done in either way in trying to rebalance our books. But I think there are always a lot of other ways which government could rein in its expenditure so as to rebalance its fiscus. But when you're looking at what government could have done by that time, they could have rationalized the civil service. They could have possibly restructured some of those parastatals, excess employees, redundant employees. They should have been chucked out of the civil service. There was also an opportunity to sell some of those parastatals and so forth. And it's a whole lot of system reformation that should have come through, some institutional reforms that should have come through. Gradually, that would reduce the net expenditure levels of this country. But they chose the quicker way, which is just to increase revenue. But the net implication of increasing taxes is that people will definitely reduce their expenditure. And once expenditure is reduced, indirectly you are killing your aggregate demand. So either way, any austerity measures should be approached at as a way of, it only has to be a short-term way of doing things. When it's overdone, it kills aggregate demand, it kills production, and on the net, it kills the GDP of any respective economy.
Oh, thank you for that insight. Going on to the cabinet's decision to review the minimum wages for domestic workers. What are your thoughts on that? Because some people would argue that $160 for a gardener isn't anything compared to what he has to actually spend that money on, and how much it costs to maintain a living in Zimbabwe right now. What are your thoughts on the current minimum wage review?
I don't think I really have a view in terms of these salary reviews, but I think when you're looking at it in terms of value basis, all those figures do not reflect any kind of value. But either way, how effective is government's involvement in setting minimum wages for this kind of domestic workers? I think we would agree, you and me, that there is no recourse at court or wherever if any person decides to pay their maid $2. It is actually happening anyway. So I don't think it's actually effective for government to come out and say this is the minimum wage for housekeepers and so forth, because they cannot effect it. But also, I think it reflects government's own mindset when it actually redressed the civil service wage bill. They said the minimum wage for a civil servant is now possibly something close to $1,000. So when you're looking at 168 to thereabout as an average, that's just close to 10% of the maybe 8% thereabout of the net income which a government employee should be getting. So I think it would have not been wiser for them to have spelled out a minimum wage for a domestic worker, which is possibly close to what they're paying for their own civil servants. I mean, it would reflect to how they're failing to even address their own workers' plight. So I think it's just a figure. I don't think there's anyone who takes those numbers seriously anymore.
I see. All right. Moving on to the next question. The Zimbabwe's total foreign currency receipts fell drastically by 24% compared to last year. What do you think were the main drivers for the half year of 2019?
So we earned 2.5 billion over the first six months.
Yes.
So net foreign receipts are a function of our exports. They are also a function of our receipts in terms of diaspora remittances. And in terms of our other investments outside. So if Zimbabweans are investing outside, there are monies that flow from those investments. They are part of what we call the BOP. So this is a net BOP position. It came from about 2.8 billion to about 2.5 billion. But the key drivers of that fall were a decline in net exports of minerals. Net minerals exports declined by above 10%. And if you're looking at gold specifically, its own exports value fell by over 20% in the first half of the year. And then we've got the other item now being the remittances from diasporans, those families outside who are supporting their local families, and there was a sharp decline. I think what is happening here is with the whole change in the currency regime and in the whole monetary system of the state, people are finding ways of sending their money outside of the basic systems or the basic financial systems so as to preserve value. There's always a fear that if you send your money via your normal channels, it might not get here using the same value. And before, there was also fears that the currency might be converted at the point where you want to withdraw it. So I think all these fed into ad hoc ways and other unconventional ways of bringing money inside. So it couldn't be captured within the national numbers as remittances coming into Zimbabwe. So as for other minerals, the key driver of the fall in mineral exports, particularly gold, is that the disruption in the payment system or the disruptions in the currency system meant that your payment or partial payment of these flows, I think about 50% in terms of the money that you're supposed to, if you're selling 100%, you get 50 as USD, and the difference in local currency, and the rate at which the local currency is falling, you would imagine what exporters would feel in terms of their loss. So some of these, especially small-scale miners, they're now taking the produce and taking it outside the country, selling it to South Africa via other unconventional ways. So this is depriving the nation of the money that we should be getting as net foreign currency receipts. So this is the reason why we are down 24%. But the net implication is that it means that our net forex position is actually below last year. It actually means that we are in a further crisis because we failed to generate as much as we generated last year. And it might mean sustained foreign currency crisis in the country.
I see. Well, thank you, Respect, for joining us. This concludes our evening news review. May you join us next as we go into the markets daily. Stay tuned. Okay.
Climbing to the top takes more than just hard work and smart choices. It's the passion that drives you from within, the endurance to keep going through difficult times, and having a very clear vision of how to succeed. That's what we strive for at CBZ. We're a diversified and innovative listed financial services group in Zimbabwe with a complete range of activities including banking, short and long-term insurance, asset management, and property investments. CBZ has been a pinnacle for stability in the economic landscape of Zimbabwe, stemming from our deep-rooted values, our excellent customer service delivery, and our corporate vision to strive for excellence as a global competitor. Our continuous investment in research and development will cement our promise to provide customer convenience utilizing state-of-the-art technology. Relationships are at the core of what we do. We understand, however, that strong, long-lasting partnerships are not built overnight. With over 3 decades of wealth management, we have come to understand our clients and their specific investment requirements. Our unique mix of skills ensures that investment opportunities are examined from all perspectives. The balancing rocks of Zimbabwe have weathered the elements for thousands of years and stood the test of time, like majestic reminders of the fine balance of nature. They challenge our perception of what is possible and what endures. Just as CBZ has weathered the economic storms and remained steadfast throughout the turbulence of unsettled economies. Achieving the impossible through resilience and stability, we balance the elements of hard work, dedication, and experience, making us your ideal partner for success.
There is carnage in the markets, and investors are moving towards stocks. Welcome back to Markets Daily. I'm your host today, Respect Wednesday. The stock market today moved further upwards, stretching its winning streak to 7 consecutive sessions. We have seen a consolidation of stocks as investors retrace to the market amid serious carnage in the currency market. The currency market has seen a dissipation in terms of the value of the local currency against your typical US dollar over the past few days, and the exchange rate has moved sharply, coming from about 1:10 a few days ago to close today's session at almost 14 times. We'll talk more about that in our look at the currency market. But looking at today's market participation, we saw a total of 18 counters exchanging hands, and of these there was no single faller. A total of 8 counters traded up on the prior session, leading to a 1.07% gain in the all-share index, which closed at around 173 points. As for the mining index, it closed stable, while the ZSC Industrials and the ZSC Top 10 closed in positive territory. A total of 5 heavy cap counters out of the 10 heavy caps traded in the positive direction to show the intensity of the current surge in price. But to take you back, there has been, before the current gains, the market fell for almost 5 straight sessions before rising, for 5 straight weeks before rising in the prior week. To date, the market is up 7 consecutive sessions. And in today's session alone, there was a value gain of more than 1%. Moving to your net performance in terms of value, the stock market saw a 50% decline in terms of value traded, closing in at about 5 billion, coming from about 10 billion. This is a result of scrip, which is failing to investors holding on to their scrip in the market as supply tightens amidst firm demand on the market. Moving on to the currency, today the Zimbabwean dollar further lost value against the US dollar, mainly a result of weak investor confidence, as well as some other weak macroeconomic fundamentals which our currency is suffering from. The market closed at about 13.9 times to a single US dollar. This obviously spells gloom in terms, and today we closed at around 1:19 thereabout. I think in terms of the outlook, we are not looking as good in terms of how investors, the investor sentiment has shifted towards other safe haven assets. It really speaks to a lot of lack of confidence and obviously a lack of funds elsewhere. Thank you for joining us, and good evening.